Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, January 14th, 2026. We are in the book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 29. We're going to start in verse 1. Hezekiah was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Abijah, daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. Now, that is almost a quote of 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 1 and 2. It tells basically all the facts that the chroniclers used from the book of 2 Kings. 2 Kings deals with Hezekiah. Isaiah deals with Hezekiah. Chronicles deals with Hezekiah. And they all deal with different material. And the reason is that final phrase in there, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. So he is a righteous king. He is a man after God's own heart. And he does all kinds of right things. And we're going to find out tonight from the very beginning. Verse 3. In the first month of the first year of his reign, he opened the doors of the temple of the Lord and repaired them. He brought in the priests and the Levites, assembled them in the square in the east, and said, "Listen to me, Levites. Consecrate yourselves now and consecrate the temple of the Lord, the God of your fathers. Remove all defilement from the sanctuary. Our fathers were unfaithful, and they did evil in the eyes of the Lord and forsook him. They turned their faces away from the Lord's dwelling place and turned their backs on him. They also shut the doors of the portico and put out the lamps. They did not burn incense or present any burnt offerings at the sanctuary to the God of Israel. Therefore, the anger of the Lord has fallen on Judah and Jerusalem, and he has made them an object of dread and horror and scorn, as you can see with your very own eyes. This is why our fathers have fallen by the sword, and our sons and daughters and our wives are in captivity. Now I intend to make a covenant with the Lord, the God of Israel, so that his fierce anger will turn away from us. My sons, do not be negligent now, for the Lord has chosen you to stand before him and serve him, to minister before him, and to burn incense." That is the speech that Hezekiah opened his kingship with. He assembled the priests and the Levites and brought them to the temple and gave them this speech in the very first month of his reign. The first day of the first month of his first year of reign. So he did not waste time. He had seen, he was 25 when he started to reign, so he was old enough to be a little bit wise. His father had reigned 16 years, so he was 9 years old when his father started reigning. He had seen Jotham and Jotham's reign and how God had prospered him, and had seen how God had cursed Ahaz and everything that had gone on. And he mentions that. That's why everybody's in captivity and why everybody's dead. And so he has them start the work of getting the temple clean and ready to be used. And tells them that he plans to, make a covenant between himself and the people and God, so that they would worship God. And God clearly is going to bless him because, we found at the beginning he reigned for 29 years. That means he was 54 when he died, fairly typical lifespan of somebody in that day and time. 45 was average. So he's, 9 years older than that. But for being king, that's probably typical of an age. And he reigned a fairly long time. And he reigned during difficult times. God did not want to destroy Judah. That's why he didn't leave somebody that was like Ahaz on the throne, but somebody that was after his own heart. And Hezekiah did not waste time. And he brought the right people in, which means he had studied and he got this done right. And he had made sure the right people were doing the work. Verse 12. Then these Levites set to work from the Kohathites, Mahath, the son of Amasai, and Joel, the son of Azariah. From the Merarites, Kish, the son of Abdi, and Azariah, the son of Jehalelel. From the Gershonites, Joah, the son of Zimmah, and Eden, the son of Joah. And from the descendants of Elizaphan, Shimri and Jael. From the descendants of Asaph, Zechariah and Mattaniah. And from the descendants of Heman, Jehiel and Shimi. From the descendants of Jeduthun, Shemaiah and Uzziel. When they had assembled their brothers and consecrated themselves, they went in to purify the temple of the Lord as the king had ordered, following the word of the Lord. The priest went into the sanctuary of the Lord to purify it. They brought out to the courtyard of the Lord's temple anything unclean they found in the temple of the Lord. The Levites took it and carried it out to the Kidron Valley. They began the consecration on the first day of the first month, and by the 8th day of the month, they had reached the portico of the Lord. For 8 more days, they consecrated the temple of the Lord itself, finishing on the 16th day of the first month. So the Levites and all their clans were represented. They had their leadership there, and the leadership brought everybody in, and an adequate force was there. And it took them 16 days, 8 days to clean the courtyards and then 8 days to clean the temple. And when they did so, they finally had everything out. By the way, the Kidron Valley was where they took rubbish and where they took unclean things. And so that's where they were supposed to take anything that was unclean from the temple to, and they did. And so they cleaned the temple, and we know from some of the other records, 2 Kings and stuff, that idols and things like that had been brought into the Lord's temple. And so it's things like that they were taking out. I'm sure they were having to take out dirt and sticks and twigs and things like that, because if you have an abandoned building, the door shut, animals get in, dirt blows in, etc. And they're probably going to have to uproot weeds and things like that. But that's not the main point. Yes, they're cleaning that kind of thing out. They're preparing it for worship. They're cleaning the pavement. But it has gotten filthy from lack of use, and it had spiritual filth in it that they had to take out and destroy and cast into an unclean spot. And they did so. Verse 18. Then they went into King Hezekiah and reported, "We have purified the entire temple of the Lord, the altar of burnt offering with all its utensils, and the table for setting out the consecrated bread with all its utensils. We have prepared and consecrated all the articles that King Ahaz removed in his unfaithfulness while he was king. They are now in front of the Lord's altar." So in those 8 days, they found everything that was needed to restart worship in the temple. They cleaned it. They put it where it belonged. And now they've reported, I said 8 days, 16 days. And they reported back to their king they'd done their job and they were ready to now dedicate the temple. Verse 20. Early the next morning, King Hezekiah gathered the city officials together and went up to the temple of the Lord. They brought 7 bulls, 7 rams, 7 male lambs, and 7 male goats as a sin offering for the kingdom, for the sanctuary, and for Judah. The king commanded the priests, the descendants of Aaron, to offer these on the altar of the Lord. So they slaughtered the bulls, and the priests took the blood and sprinkled it on the altar. Next, they slaughtered the rams and sprinkled the blood on the altar. Then they slaughtered the lambs and sprinkled their blood on the altar. The goats for the sin offering were brought before the Lord in the assembly, and they laid their hands on them. The priests then slaughtered the goats and presented their blood on the altar for a sin offering to atone for all Israel, because the king had ordered the burnt offering and the sin offering for all Israel. So as soon as the temple gets cleaned, he brings all the local dignitaries in. He can't go all over the kingdom and get everybody. But as soon as it's reported, he brings all the local officials together and they bring an offering to dedicate the temple and then to offer a sin offering for everything that's been done. And he does it in multiples of 7. He's basically dedicating it for, once for each day of the week, or 7 being the perfect number, the round number, to complete everything. There are several different interpretations of this, but it was symbolic to them that he was trying to make sure that he was doing it right. And they consecrated the temple and then offered the sin offerings that needed to be offered because Judah had been unfaithful and the temple had become disrepaired and people needed to come back to God. Verse 25, he stationed the Levites in the temple of the Lord with cymbals, harps, and lyres in the way prescribed by David and Gad the king's seer and Nathan the prophet. This was commanded by the Lord through his prophets. So the Levites stood ready with David's instruments and the priests with their trumpets. So he's initiating temple worship the way David and the prophets that David had insisted God wanted in the temple. The musical instruments, the same instruments, the same singing, the same, worship order. Verse 27. Hezekiah gave the order to sacrifice the burnt offering on the altar. As the offering began, singing to the Lord began also, accompanied by trumpets and instruments of David, the king of Israel. The whole assembly bowed in worship while the singers sang and the trumpeters played. All this continued until the sacrifice of the burnt offering was completed. When the offering was finished, the king and everyone present with him knelt down and worshipped. King Hezekiah and his officials ordered the Levites to praise the Lord with the words of David and of Asaph the seer. So they sang praises with gladness and bowed their heads and worshipped. So they have a worship service, and Hezekiah basically orders the psalms that they had to be used in worship. And this is actually the first recorded instance where they were singing in the temple. David and his men, the instruments were playing in the background, and the singers recited the psalms. And so it was more like rap music today than what we think of as, worshipful music. Here is the first instance we have recorded in Scripture that singing was done in worship. Now, that said, David in his temple worship, and Solomon in his temple worship, they called them singers, and they knew what poetry was. So there were songs and they were sung, but this is the first place it's recorded they were sung. The Hebrews would have just said, well, if they're singers, they were singing. At the Hezekiah's day, they're explicitly pointing out they're singing the songs of God, because they had abandoned that practice for at least a while, and they wanted to make the comment they were coming back to what God wanted done. And the people bowed and worshipped. They were being humble before the Lord, and the king was one of those people that led the people to bow before the Lord. Verse 31. Then Hezekiah said, "You have now dedicated yourselves to the Lord. Come and bring sacrifices and thank offerings to the temple of the Lord." So the assembly brought sacrifices and thank offerings, and all those whose hearts were willing brought burnt offerings. The number of burnt offerings the assembly brought was 70 bulls, 100 rams, and 200 male lambs, all of them for burnt offerings to the Lord. The animals consecrated as sacrifices amounted to 600 bulls and 3,000 sheep and goats. The priests, however, were too few to skin all the burnt offerings, so their kinsmen, the Levites, helped them until the task was finished, until other priests had been consecrated. For the Levites had been more conscientious in consecrating themselves than the priests had been. There were burnt offerings in abundance, together with the fat of the fellowship offerings and the drink offerings that accompanied the burnt offerings. So the priests got overwhelmed by the amount of work. Not enough priests had consecrated themselves, and the Levites were to help the priest, and they understood that. And normally the Levites' task was more the mundane things. Bring wood in, keep the fire tended on the altar, keep stuff clean, keep knives sharp, that kind of thing. Keep water in the basins, pour the water over the priest's hands so he can wash his hands, all that kind of thing. But because they were overwhelmed, some of the mundane things of the sacrifice that needed to be done, such as skin the animals after they've been killed, they consecrated their Levite helpers to help have them do, so the priests could get the work done. And the Levites were quite willing to help their kinsman, the priest, the Aaronic priest, and they did the job. And obviously, priests were coming in and dedicating themselves and consecrating themselves, and therefore entering the service of the Lord again. But that first day, there was just more to be done than they could do. And the Levites helped them. Middle of verse 35. So the service of the temple of the Lord was reestablished. Hezekiah and all the people rejoiced at what God had brought forth for his people, because it was done so quickly. Let's face it, 16 days to clean the filth out, and the 17th day the temple was rededicated. When they probably heard the king, they were thinking, we may take months to get all this cleaned out. It didn't take them that long. They had enough helpers. The Levites came and consecrated themselves and cleaned the temple. And they did the job right. And so everybody rejoiced. It happened quickly. Hezekiah's reign is off to a good start because he did things correctly. And he was dedicated to God, and he wanted things to go correctly. And he'd done his research. He had the right people doing the right things. He told them to do the right things. And because he was like David, he wanted God's things done and done right. And because of that, God is going to bless him. He's a man that's going to rule during hard times. All kinds of disasters are going to happen, and yet he is going to prosper during hard times. His father was an evil and vile man and had a short and brutal reign that was bad for everybody. The country was diminished. And from day one, Hezekiah means for the country to be reestablished under God. And so the first and most important thing he does is rededicate the temple, get it clean, then rededicate it, and have people start worshiping God again. And that's what happens. And because of that, Hezekiah is going to have a very successful reign, and a relatively long one. Nobody in the generations around him reigns as long as he did. Now, David was 40 years. Solomon was 40 years. There have been people before that reigned longer, and people after him will reign longer. But Hezekiah himself will have a nice reign, and his rule will be well established. I don't mean to get too far ahead, but he is one of the great kings of Israel, and the chroniclers know that, and they're pointing out what he did right to be successful. And they're contrasting it with his father Ahaz, who shuttered the temple, took everything out of it that was of any worth, dedicated them to other things, to doing other things, and then, met disaster after disaster after disaster. And that's what Hezekiah was talking about at the beginning, when he wanted the priests and the Levites to clean things up. Holy Father, have us to be like Hezekiah, who was a man after your heart, who wanted people to obey you and to worship you correctly and to do what you wanted done. And he gave orders for it to happen. And you blessed them because they did it, and they did it quickly and well. And he reinstituted worship of you. And because of that, you held things together. And to the outside world, he may have looked like he had endless troubles during his reign. But he was successful when he should not have been. Have us to be like that, to understand that worshiping you is what causes success, that you will bring about success when we worship you. Have us to worship you in spirit and truth, and do what is necessary. In your holy name, amen. I am your host, Frank Reich, Associate Pastor, Family and Ministry at Grace Fellowship Baptist Church, and this has been the Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, January 14th, 2026. It was recorded on Saturday, January 10th, 2026. Today was my mother's 90th birthday, and we went over and helped her celebrate her birthday. And I hope at least some of y'all went to her house and helped her celebrate also. When we got there, middle of the afternoon, other people had eaten some cake. So obviously somebody else. She didn't talk about who had been there. I got to meet her housekeeper, a thoroughly lovely woman that does a good job. I could tell that somebody's been keeping house. Mother's no longer capable of keeping it as clean as it's staying. And so I appreciate her doing that job. And Mother actually appreciated and commented and thanked her. So we had a lovely day. I hope to see you tomorrow at church. I hope to see you Wednesday at the Bible study, where we'll just start discussing Hezekiah. We'll be with Hezekiah for several weeks because in 2 Chronicles, they deal with him in multiple chapters. He's a very influential king. Lots happens, and lots of things happen to him. There's lots of trying times, and through it all, he continually turns back to God, continually takes things to him and says, God, help me. And God blesses him with that because of that. And so Hezekiah becomes a pivotal king. He keeps the kingdom together when, by earthly terms, the Assyrians should have defeated him. He didn't have the strength. He didn't have, because Ahaz before him had weakened the country so much. And while he reigned long enough to build things back up, the Assyrians come before he can build things back up. And he spends most of his career rebuilding the country and doing it again and again. And so he was successful because he worshiped God. And the chroniclers want to point that out, that how faithful you are to God is directly linked to how successful you are. So if I don't see you here anywhere else, we'll see you here on YouTube. Have a blessed week.